My name is Nina, and until the new people moved in across the street, our days on the quiet block felt steady in the way that matters when you have a 6-year-old. Ryan worked long hours at the insurance office downtown. I kept the house and handled most of Mia's school stuff, and then the three of us ate dinner together more nights than not. We weren't rich, but the mortgage was manageable, and the backyard had enough grass for Mia to chase the neighbor's cat when it wandered over. I liked the predictability. Well, the morning they arrived, I was on the front porch sweeping the dead leaves that always collected in the corners. A big rental truck sat in the driveway opposite ours. 2 people stood inside the empty living room watching the movers carry in a couch and a dining table. I raised a hand and smiled. The polite wave you give when someone's about to be part of your daily view. Neither of them smiled back. The woman leaned toward the man's ear, said something that I couldn't hear, and then both of them laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, open-mouthed laugh that made my face go hot. I dropped my eyes down to the broom and I kept sweeping until the truck doors slammed and they disappeared deeper into the house. A few days later, I was standing on the end of the driveway with Mia, waiting for the school bus. The woman was on her own porch, wiping down the railing with a rag. She wore a crimson pajama set, button front top, the exact same one that I had been wearing the morning they moved in. Her hair was pulled up the same loose way that I had worn mine that day, a few strands falling against her neck. She looked straight up at me, gave a small, closed-lipped smile, and just kept staring while she worked. I lifted my hand. "Morning. Hope the move went okay." She didn't answer. She just kept that same small smile and the stare. Mia tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, why isn't she waving back?" I told her the lady was probably tired from unpacking, and then changed the subject to what she wanted for lunch. I tried to put it out of my mind. New people are allowed to be awkward. But 2 mornings later, I was in the living room folding laundry, and I just happened to glance out the front window. She was standing on the sidewalk directly across from our house, arms folded, watching the windows. Not walking, not pretending to look at her phone, just standing there. I stepped sideways so that the curtain blocked me, and I finished folding the towels with my back to the glass. The night it got worse, we were all on the couch watching one of Mia's cartoons. Mia was giggling at something on the screen, and I laughed with her. And then the feeling hit. The same prickling that I used to get as a kid when I knew that someone was behind me in a dark hallway. I turned toward the front window. Their house was completely dark. I told myself I was being ridiculous, and I looked back at the TV. A car came down the street. For 1 second, the light caught them both standing there, side by side, faces blank, eyes fixed on our couch. "Ryan, they're right there. Look," I pointed. He leaned forward, squinted. "I don't see anybody, babe. Their lights are off." "When the car passed, I saw them. They were staring straight at us." He reached for my hand and pulled me back down. "Nina, the TV's bright. Your eyes are adjusting." "Mia, you okay?" Our daughter nodded, suddenly quiet. Ryan lowered his voice. "You've been wound up since they moved in. Maybe just give it a couple of weeks." I sat there with my hands clenched in my lap, and I didn't argue, but the knot in my stomach stayed. I called my friend Lisa the next afternoon while Mia was at school. "The people across the street are off," I told her. "The wife copies my clothes. She stands on the sidewalk and watches the house. Last night, I swear, they were at their window in the dark, staring at us." Lisa was quiet for a second. "Have you actually talked to them? Maybe they're just weirdos who don't know how to be neighborly. Or maybe you're reading too much into it because you're home a lot." I know she meant well, but the words still stung. I changed the subject. Well, 10 days after they moved in, I walked home from Lisa's after dinner. It was a short walk, just around the block. Their porch light was on, and the front yard was lit enough that I saw everything clearly. The man, Derek, I found out later, was on his hands and knees on the grass. A wide, black collar sat around his neck with a leash clipped to it. The woman, Vanessa, held the other end. "Crawl," she said, voice carrying in the quiet. He dropped forward and crawled to a metal bowl sitting on the grass, lowered his face into it, and started eating. She bent down and stroked his hair. "Good boy." I stopped walking. My keys were in my hand and I couldn't remember how to use them. Vanessa turned her head slowly and looked straight at me. The smile that spread across her face was slow and wide and nothing like the small one that she had given at the bus stop. Derek looked up too, mouth still shiny from the bowl, and grinned the same way. And then both of them started laughing. Loud, wild, almost howling laughter that bounced off the houses. I ran the last stretch to my door, dropped the keys once, got inside, and threw the deadbolt. I stood with my back against the door until my legs stopped shaking. I didn't tell Ryan that night. I lay awake wondering if I had actually seen it or if something in my head had finally snapped. A few nights later, Ryan and I were in the kitchen after Mia was asleep. I was wiping down the counters. He was loading up the dishwasher. A scream came from across the street, high and sharp, and then cut off fast. Ryan straightened up. That didn't sound like a TV. He was already moving towards the front door, and I grabbed his wrist. "Ryan, don't! Just call the police if you're worried. Please!" He shook his head. "No, if somebody's hurt, I am not going to stand here and do nothing." "Ryan, listen to me! Do not go over there!" My voice was rising. He pulled his arm free. Not rough, just firm. "I'll be 2 minutes. Stay inside." I followed him onto the porch anyway, arms wrapped tight. He crossed the street and knocked on their door. It opened after a moment. Vanessa stood in the doorway. She smiled at Ryan like they were old friends. "Ryan, right? Everything okay?" "We had a movie on too loud. Sorry about that." She glanced past him at me standing on our porch, and then took his hand and pulled him gently, but without hesitation, across the threshold. "Come in for a second so I can show you that we're fine. Tell your wife she's welcome too." The door closed behind them. I screamed his name. I don't remember deciding to run. I was just suddenly at the bottom of their steps, banging on the door with both fists. No one answered. I screamed again. I woke up in our bed with the sheets twisted around my legs and Ryan sitting up beside me, one hand on my back. "Nina, hey, you were yelling." My heart was still slamming against my ribs. It was a dream. It felt real. They were in the yard again, and then you went over, and then she pulled you inside, and I couldn't get you to come out. The words came out in a rush, and Ryan pulled me against his chest. "Jesus. Wow. No wonder you screamed." It's okay. It was just a dream." He rubbed slow circles between my shoulder blades. "They're probably just a couple who likes their privacy and doesn't know how to wave hello. Nothing more than that." The reassurance from Ryan's arms didn't stick. I tried to believe him. Tried to believe that the neighbors were just private people who didn't know how to wave. But the knot in my stomach never loosened. 2 weeks later, we had plans for dinner at that little Italian place downtown. Mia was staying with Lisa for the night. We were halfway there, Ryan humming along to the radio, when I glanced at the rearview mirror and I saw their dark sedan 3 cars back. I kept driving, told myself it was nothing. And then the sedan changed lanes when I did. Slowed when I slowed. My hands went slick on the wheel. "Ryan, they're behind us." He looked over his shoulder. The sedan's headlights flared as it pulled out and passed us without slowing. Derek's profile was clear for a second, and Vanessa sat beside him, staring straight ahead. "See," Ryan said, settling back. "Just go in the same direction." "You're wound too tight, babe." I didn't answer. My heart was still hammering. On the way home, the argument started the second that we pulled out of the restaurant parking lot. "What's wrong with you tonight? You barely touched the food. You kept checking the window like you expected them to walk in." "Because they were following us," I said. My voice came out sharper than I meant. "I saw their car in the mirror for 10 minutes straight." "It passed us, Nina. People drive on the same roads. It could have been a coincidence. How would they know we were going to that restaurant?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Unless they heard us talking about it. Unless they're listening." Ryan was quiet for a long moment, and then he laughed once, short and tired. Jesus. Listening. "You think they bugged our house? Put a microphone in the living room while we were at work?" I don't know. I don't know how they know the things they know. I don't know why she copies my clothes, or why they stand in the dark staring at us, or why she had Derek on a leash in their front yard like a dog. I don't know any of it, Ryan. And you keep telling me that I'm imagining things when I know what I saw." He pulled into our driveway and he killed the engine. For a second, neither of us moved. "You're scaring Mia," he said finally. "You're scaring me. Every time I come home, you're at that window. You forget to cook. You forgot to pick her up from the bus on time last week. Lisa had to bring her home. This isn't you." I stared at our dark living room window. Across the street, their porch light was on, but I couldn't see anyone moving behind the glass. "I'm not crazy," I whispered. "I didn't say you were crazy. I said you're obsessed. And it's getting worse." That night I lay awake listening to the house settle. Every creak sounded like footsteps on their porch. Every car on the street sounded like their sedan pulling up. I got up twice to check the locks. The next 6 months blurred into something that I still can't look at straight. Their staring never stopped. If anything, it got more deliberate. Vanessa would stand on her porch in whatever I had worn a few days before. She'd smile that small, closed-lip smile and then hold my gaze until I looked away. Derek started joining her sometimes, both of them side by side, faces blank, until one of them would laugh and then they'd go back inside. I started keeping watch. I told myself it was just being careful. I'd stand at the living room window with the curtain cracked, phone in my hand in case I needed to call someone. And then I started doing it while I was supposed to be folding laundry. And then, while dinner was on the stove, I burned 3 meals in 1 week. Ryan started coming home to the smoke alarm and Mia asking why the chicken was black again. I stopped showering some days. Couldn't remember the last time I'd washed my hair. The house got messy. Laundry piled up on the couch, dishes in the sink, Mia's toys scattered because, well, I kept forgetting to tell her to pick them up. I'd catch Ryan looking at me with this careful, worried expression, and I would snap at him before he could say anything. Lisa stopped calling after the 3rd time that I told her that they were still watching. She said that I needed to talk to someone professional. I hung up on her. The only thing that mattered was that house across the street. Then, without warning, it all changed. One morning I woke up, and Vanessa wasn't on her porch. Derek's car was gone. I stood at the window for an hour just waiting for them to appear. Nothing. Well, that afternoon I took Mia to the park, and when we came back, their blinds were still closed. No one on the sidewalk, no one at the window. Now, at first I thought, maybe they're out of town. But then a week passed. Then 2. They were there. I saw lights on at night. I saw Derek's car in the driveway some evenings. But they stopped looking at us completely. It should have been a relief, but it wasn't. I couldn't stop watching. I needed to know why they had stopped. Had they gotten bored? Had I done something wrong? Every time I caught myself staring at their empty windows, I felt sick, and I kept staring anyway, because what if the second that I looked away, they started staring again? I forgot Mia's school picture day. I forgot to pay the electric bill. Ryan found me at 3 in the morning, standing in the dark living room with the curtain open, just watching. And that was the night that everything cracked. We were in the kitchen. He was loading the dishwasher again because, well, I hadn't. I was scrubbing the same spot on the counter over and over. You have to stop. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. Mia asked me yesterday if Mommy was sick because you keep forgetting to brush your hair. I can't keep doing this, Nina. They're still doing it. They're just being smarter about it now. They want me to think I'm crazy. Ryan set a plate down harder than he needed to. Don't you see it? They don't care about you. It's you who has become the creepy lady next door for them. You're the one staring at their house for hours. You're the one who follows their car. You're the one who stands up on the porch watching their windows like you're waiting for them to slip up. They're living their life, and you're the one who can't look away. I didn't argue. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of our bed until my hands stopped shaking. And then I made a decision. I was going to stop. No more window, no more checking, no more letting them live in my head. If they wanted to play games, they could play them alone. For 3 days, I kept my promise. I cooked actual meals. I showered. I took Mia to the library and let her pick out too many books. I even called Lisa and apologized. The relief was thin and shaky, but it was there. On the 4th morning, I walked into the living room with my coffee and saw the movers truck parked in front of their house. My stomach dropped. They were at the window, both of them watching me. No creepy smile this time. Vanessa's face was blank, almost curious. Derek stood beside her, one hand on the glass. They looked strange. And then Vanessa raised her hand and waved. A big, slow wave. Her mouth curved into that wide open smile that I remembered from the first day. Derek smiled too, the same knowing curve. Neither of them looked away. I didn't wave back. I stood there with my coffee going cold in my hands and stared until they stepped away from the glass. I watched them carry boxes to the truck, watched Vanessa lock the front door for the last time, watched Derek hold the passenger door for her, like they were any normal couple moving to a new life. They drove away without looking back. The house across the street stayed empty for several days. I kept waiting for the anxiety to lift. It didn't. Every time I stepped onto the porch, I felt eyes on the back of my neck. I caught myself glancing at their dark windows even when I told myself not to. The feeling that I was being watched had burrowed in too deep to dig out with one decision. Well, a week later, I was sweeping dead leaves off of the porch again when another mover's truck pulled up across the street. New people. A young couple from the look of the boxes. I told myself it didn't matter. New neighbors, normal people. I kept sweeping. And then I looked up. A woman stood at their front window unpacking something from a box. When she noticed me, she smiled. Friendly, a little tired, and raised her hand in a small wave. I stopped sweeping. She kept waving, her smile faltering a little when I didn't respond. She said something over her shoulder, probably to her husband, and then looked back at me and waved again, bigger this time, like she was trying to be neighborly. I stared at her. I couldn't make myself look away. My fingers tightened around the broom handle until the wood bit into my palm. Every muscle in my body was braced for the moment that her smile would change, for the moment that she would lean towards someone that I couldn't see, and then laugh that same open-mouthed laugh that had started all of this. But she didn't. She just kept waving, looking confused now, until I turned and walked back into my house. I closed the door, locked it, and I still couldn't stop looking. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Columbus, in a 2-story house with a wide backyard that backed up onto a line of tall hedges. The place had always felt like my private kingdom, a spot where I could keep my complicated life neatly partitioned. I was dating 3 men at once, and none of them knew about the others. Mark thought he was the only one. Jake believed that our fiery chemistry made us inevitable. Alex paid for the illusion that I belonged only to him. I juggled them with the precision of someone who had learned early that honesty was a liability. Well, the trouble started with Mr. Ellis next door. It began in the middle of the night. I'd be lying in bed after one of Jake's visits when the chainsaw would rip through the silence. 5 minutes of angry buzzing. And then the lawnmower would start up, even though his grass was already trimmed short. The sound dragged across my nerves. I'd press my face into the pillow and tell myself it was nothing. Old man, bored, losing his mind. But it kept happening. One evening, Mark was over, fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen, like the dependable boyfriend he believed he was. Mark, the neighbor's at it again. Chainsaw at 2 a.m. And then the mower, like he's trying to wake the dead. Mark barely glanced up. Guy's probably got insomnia. Or dementia. You want me to talk to him? Would you? I hate feeling like I'm the only one hearing it. I got you, babe. He never did talk to Mr. Ellis. By the time he left that night, I had already decided that I wouldn't rely on any of them for real protection. I handled my own messes. The noises continued for weeks. Then, late one night, they stopped early. I heard the chainsaw die out and crept to the upstairs window. Mr. Ellis dragged a long extension ladder from his garage. He propped it up against the back of his house, climbed with surprising steadiness, and stepped onto the roof. I expected him to tinker with something. Instead, he stood at the peak and turned, slowly, staring at every house on the street. When his gaze reached mine, he froze, just stood there, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on my window. My pulse hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, scribbled something, and then scrambled down the ladder like something was chasing him. The back door slammed, lights went out. The next afternoon, I had my eyes closed, letting the warmth settle when the feeling hit me. Someone watching. I sat up slowly and shaded my eyes. Mr. Ellis stood on his roof again, binoculars in one hand, notebook in the other. He lowered them, gave me a slow wave, and smiled like we shared a private joke. And then he wrote something down. I didn't wave back. I gathered my towel and walked inside. But I couldn't help testing whether he was still looking. He was. That marked the beginning of 6 long months. I kept my routine with the men while the roof visits became regular. Mark came on Mondays with takeout. Jake showed up midweek with perfumes and chocolates. Alex arrived on weekends with expensive wine. I lied to all of them with ease. To Mark, I was the perfect future wife. To Jake, I was wild and unattached. To Alex, I was his princess. One Thursday after Jake left, I stood at the bedroom window when I saw Mr. Ellis on the roof again. His head tilted. He wrote furiously. I laughed under my breath and I closed the blinds. The carvings started appearing on my welcome mat. First, a crude wooden woman with long hair like mine. Then, one of her posing confidently. I kept the second one on my nightstand. When Alex noticed it during one of his visits, he raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Oh, neighbor left it." "Sweet, isn't it?" "Someone's got a crush." "As long as he knows you're my princess." I smiled and said nothing. A few weeks later, I woke up one night to scratching sounds against the siding near my bedroom. Heart pounding, I grabbed the bat that I kept under the bed and looked out. Mr. Ellis stood in the narrow gap between our houses. When he saw me, he pressed one finger to his lips and then backed away into the dark. I told Jake about it the next evening. He was right outside my window. "Want me to beat his ass?" "Maybe. Or maybe I like knowing he's watching." "The hell, Petra?" Afterward, he looked at me differently, like he'd glimpsed something that he wasn't sure he liked. Good. I needed them off balance. The confrontations with Mr. Ellis happened only once. I caught him in his front yard raking leaves that didn't need raking, and I marched over. "Why are you watching me?" I demanded. "I see things, Petra." "You don't know me." "I know enough. Mark on Mondays with Japanese takeouts. Jake when you want expensive perfumes and chocolates. Alex when you want the fancy dinners and the credit card. I write it all down. Dates, times, license plates. Figured someone should keep records of what you're doing to them." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face calm. "And what do you get out of it, Mr. Ellis?" "Are you now scared enough?" The psychological pressure built up. I started jumping at small sounds. My lies to the men grew sharper, more elaborate. When Mark asked why I seemed distant, I told him work stress. When Alex pressed about commitment, I whispered that I was falling for him. One morning, I looked out my front window and I saw a U-Haul in Mr. Ellis's driveway. He was loading boxes with surprising energy. I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed tight. He paused, turned, and stared at my house for a long moment. And then he pulled out his notebook, wrote something, tore the page free, folded it, and slipped it under his windshield wiper. He climbed into the truck and drove off without even looking back. The neighborhood breathed easier. Beth, across the street, brought over cookies the next day. Good riddance. That man had screws loose. I smiled and agreed, but my hand shook when I picked up my mug. 3 days later, I found an envelope behind my mailbox. Inside were photocopies of every note that he had ever written, dates and times of each man's visits, descriptions of what happened in the backyard, the living room, the kitchen counter, license plates. The last page was a handwritten letter. "Petra, I'm not right in the head. Never have been. But I saw what you were doing to those men, and what they were doing to you. Thought if I scared you enough, you'd stop the games before they destroyed those innocent men. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I liked watching you more than I should have. You're not innocent. Neither am I. Good luck. Ellis." I sat on the kitchen floor and read it twice. And then I burned every page in the backyard fire pit, watching the smoke curl up while I sipped the last of Alex's expensive wine. I ended things with all 3 men over the following weeks. To Mark, I cried and said that I needed space. To Jake, I told the truth, that I had been seeing others and watched his face twist. To Alex, I simply stopped answering calls and changed the locks. I painted the bedroom a soft sage green. I bought new sheets that smelled only of me, and I planted roses along the fence line where Mr. Ellis used to stand and stare. Some nights I still woke up thinking I heard the chainsaw, but it was only the wind or a neighbor's car. I would lie there, smiling in the dark, fingertips tracing the wooden carving I had kept. The woman standing alone. My Aunt Lori is kind of a train wreck. As a kid, I always saw her as the fun aunt who traveled the world. She'd visit us on holidays and bring me random toys from whatever country she last visited. She seemed like the coolest adult alive. As I got older, though, I realized that Lori really didn't have her life together. She had a different job every time I saw her. Her relationships never lasted longer than a couple of weeks. She spent way more than she had in her bank account, and she seemed to have no plans for her future. I still loved her, but now that I was officially an adult, I could see that Aunt Lori was a mess. Last summer, my boyfriend of 2 years broke up with me. It came as a complete shock. My friends and family all tried to cheer me up, but nothing worked. I was in a deep depression. Then, Lori came over with 2 plane tickets in her hand. "You're coming with me to Egypt." Now, at first I thought I heard her wrong, but nope, she was serious. She bought us both round-trip tickets to Egypt before she mentioned anything to me. She said it would be the best way to get out of my post-breakup funk. She also said the tickets were non-refundable. So, that weekend, Lori and I were on a plane headed toward Cairo. It was kind of exciting. I stopped thinking about my asshole boyfriend completely. I didn't have time to really prepare myself for Egypt, but that was part of the fun. Unfortunately, when we got there, I learned that Lori hadn't prepared for anything either. We didn't know where to exchange money, we didn't have the hotel address, or a cab to take us there, or appropriate clothes. It was a nightmare, but Lori didn't seem bothered. I assumed that all her trips were this hectic and poorly planned. After a nightmare of a taxi ride where we paid 10 times what we should have, we checked into our hotel. I got food poisoning at dinner. The maid stole my good shoes. I won't go into all the details, but trust me, it was bad. And still, Lori had this positive, chipper attitude that only made everything worse. After I recovered from the food poisoning, we hired a guide to take us to see the pyramids. We drove past the big ones, only managing to take blurry photos from a distance, but the guide kept saying that he was taking us to another pyramid. A better one, he claimed. The way this vacation was going, I assumed that he was going to take us into the middle of the desert and steal all of our money. But somehow, we arrived at a pretty awesome pyramid where we could actually walk around the edges and take photos outside the 2 entrances. It was by far the coolest place I'd ever visited. Lori seemed just as excited. The guide told us what areas were off limits, but of course Lori went wherever she wanted. I didn't want to get separated, so I followed her. We walked through the smaller entrance, and everything got very dark after only a few steps. I think we should turn back. Oh, come on! This is a once-in-a-lifetime... It was like my aunt disappeared. One minute she was right in front of me, and the next, she was gone. Then I heard a whimper just below my feet. I used the flashlight on my phone and saw that the floor had crumbled under Lori's weight. She fell into a narrow hole, and now she was stuck between stone blocks. She didn't look injured, but she couldn't move. "Get help, please!" I ran out of the pyramid, waving frantically at our guide. He took one look at me, immediately knew that we had wandered into an area that was off limits, and jumped into his van. He drove off without saying anything, probably because he didn't want to get in trouble for bringing us here. Well, no one else was nearby. Clearly, we weren't supposed to be at this pyramid. I had my phone, but I didn't know Egypt's equivalent of 911. By the way, it's 112 if you're ever there, but I didn't learn that until much later. I had the hotel number saved, but when I called the concierge, he could barely speak English. Plus, I didn't know the name of the pyramid, so I couldn't tell him where we were. He eventually hung up on me. I was sunburnt, still dehydrated from the food poisoning, and angry at this whole situation. I walked back into the pyramid, careful where I stepped, and found Lori right where I left her. I don't know what to do. You're trapped like this until someone comes.
Wow! When we get home, this'll be a great story to tell your friends.
There was something about her voice that drove me into a rage. How could she sound so chipper? We were seriously screwed. We'd probably die out here, and she was acting like this was some kind of adventure. I screamed at her. I told her that it was our own damn fault for getting stuck in a frickin' pyramid. I said that she was an embarrassment, that if we got back home, I never wanted to see her again. It was a little intense, but I couldn't help it. The words just came out of me. She didn't say anything for a long time, and it was too dark for me to see her expression. Then, out of nowhere, she started laughing. It was so sudden and surprising that I laughed too. I realized how ridiculous this all was. And just like that, my anger went away. She was the one trapped in a pyramid, not me. And if she wasn't upset with the situation, then neither was I. Maybe I was wrong about her. Sure, her life was a train wreck compared to the rest of our family, but that was her choice. She was fearless. She wanted to hop from adventure to adventure. So what if she didn't have a husband or a steady job? When we stopped laughing, her voice got pretty serious. Okay, if no one's coming for me, then grab the water bottle. Pour it around my shoulders and we'll see if that'll help me climb out. Can you do that? I doubted that this plan would work, but if it didn't, she'd probably think of something else to try. I was fishing out of water from my backpack when I heard footsteps behind me. It was our guide. He hadn't abandoned us after all. He just left to bring back his friends. There were 3 of them, and they brought ropes and a harness. I walked out of the pyramid to give them space. 20 minutes and a lot of grunting later, Lori was free. We gave the guy a huge tip. And we didn't find out that our adventure made international news until the next day. American tourist gets stuck in pyramid. Now, anyone else would have been mortified by the headlines, but not Lori. I didn't want a life like my aunt's. I need more stability. But after our trip, I've decided that I'll start living a little more like her. Why not?